Welcome back, YouTube. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation to bring you our follow-up video, part 2 of The Silent King. Thank you for all the comments and a lot of conversations I had with a lot of different people about Warhammer, about Necrons in general. It was a lot of fun. And this second part video, I want to touch base with some of the conversations I had with some people and my thoughts with some of the comments that happened in the comment section, and finish it up with what we can see in the future with Ark of Omen. I had planned on having this video out over the weekend, but holidays got a little rough. I hope everyone had a good holiday weekend, was able to get some rest, see some family members, and enjoy themselves, and hopefully maybe got some new Necrons to bring to the table, some new models and projects for these coming colder months that I'm going to be seeing out here in Cleveland. But let's get things started off with the Silent King, as he is right now in the current game. A lot of good comments coming through, a lot of questions. For the most part, it seemed like the general opinion was that he is basically an auto-include, and it's hard to get around that. And I see a lot of people's points, and I want to highlight them. Some that I agree with as well, is what we're looking at with what you're putting on the table, what the Necron Codex can do, and how the Silent King just ties that all together. So with that, I'm going to jump over to some of the comments that I had. Apologize ahead of time if I accidentally butcher anybody's name. I am sorry. So first comment comes in from Gavin Coles. Gavin Coles says, "Nope, I think he's overrated, and good players will know how to counter with the lists they have." So I don't necessarily think that the Silent King himself is what is wiping everything off the table. He did lose core. And with him losing core, he doesn't do quite as much damage. He still has a good profile. He's still a gunboat. He still has a lot of attacks in combat, a lot of shots. The Manures are some of the best anti-tank weapons that we have in the game. But that we have in the game, that the Necron army has. But in a nutshell, you're not countering the Silent King. I don't hear a lot of people competitively say, okay, I'm building a list. How do I handle the Silent King? It's how do I handle Necrons? How do I handle their objective secured? How do I handle an army that can just score points by not playing the game, by just standing on objectives and looking pretty? So I don't think he's necessarily in that column. Plus, he's not an aggressive unit. As much as a lot of us would love to see the Silent King get up there in the thick of it, he really isn't. And when we're saying a good player with the Silent King, or a experienced player with the Silent King, is going to know that there is a lot of scenarios and situations that you do not push him into. If there is an Imperial Knight warlord with auto, and this is also the Bloodthirster does this as well too. With him, any attacks that fail to reach the damage step, he gets to make another attack with. On top of it, any 6s to wound are just doing 8 mortal wounds, and he's 8 flat damage. This is both an Imperial Knight Gallant with, I believe it's a relic. Don't quote me on this one, but the way that he's fixed up and the way the most Bloodthirsters are fixed up, they have an 8 mortal wound 6s on 6s to wound, and they're doing 8 damage, and they have enough attacks that they're going to absolutely just smash the king in one hit. So and there's a lot of those threats. So you're not building for him to be in your front lines. You're building for him to be in your back lines. And I think that with the buffs that he gives, and I'm going to touch on this in a little bit, it's crucial for what he does and the buffs that he gives, and even the size of the model for that matters. So I don't necessarily think that high level or experienced players are ready to just counter the king, or ready to just absolutely, you're going to run into a matchup where someone's like, oh, I've been prepping for the king all week. That's not where it's falling into. People are looking at the objective secured. So in some ways, that bigger, beastlier model is able to kind of slip through the cracks as far as Resilient goes. Being that he's 16 wounds, he can hide behind objective secured. I had a couple people comment about that. Or I'm sorry, hide behind obscuring terrain, not objective secured. And I had a couple people comment about that, and it's very true. He can hide behind walls and terrain and not get shot at. So he's able to make it out of turn one if you don't go first. So I don't think that he's a unit that just gets countered, where like Mortarion or Magnus or Angron, even though we haven't fully seen him yet, those are guys that you want to be up in someone's face. So when those guys push forward, we'll use Mortarion as an example. When Mortarion pushes forward, he's pushing into armies usually relatively early. Since he's pushing into those armies relatively early, they still have a lot of units on the table, a lot of power, a lot of command points to spend, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So Mortarion is not going to have as big of an impact into it. Whereas the Silent King is trying to play into the late game. He's not the big damage dealer, end of days, destroyer of worlds. He brings those things, the score packs that are around him, having the reroll hits and then be able to get the reroll failed wounds, wraiths and units like that are able to be around him, and those ones that have volume of attacks, volume of AP damage, and are a lot more reliable, and access to other stratagems and core and my will be done. The list goes on. So I really feel like the Silent King just brings those buffs. And we're going to talk, I'm going to be saying that many, many times, and I'm really going to dial into that here in a minute. But I don't feel like he's something that you go up to it and know right away that someone is prepped to take out the Silent King. While Tau, Bloodthirster, and there are things in the game that can absolutely ace the king in one hit, it's not something that people are prepping and practicing for, because there's a lot of other more pertinent threats in the meta to say. Moving on to Jonathan Gnever. Again, sorry for butchering names. He says, and I think this was in a comment, I believe this was in reference to the previous comment. He says, not anymore. I think with Core, he was just bonkers enough to qualify. So we're start with that. Maybe I'm wrong. John, you can let me know, reach out to me. I think maybe, are you saying that before he was an auto include, or he is now, or he isn't now because he lost Core? He says, probably the closest thing I think we have to a must take is Technos and Chronos. Maybe Gauss heavy destroyers too, because of the inherent weakness of all our other anti-tank shooting. The last point, you're 100% right. We do lack a lot of anti-tank shooting. But for what we lack in anti-tank shooting, we do have a lot of anti-high wound close combat effects. Just recently on a video on my channel, I was able to take out a Hekaton with score pack destroyers. Oh, actually, no, that was recently. The game I played, I took a Hekaton out with score packs because the king was nearby. It was able to put enough damage. The initial score pack, the two-bladed score packs were not as effective, but the big blades, when those hit, they were just putting a lot of damage through. So we do still have some anti-armor in close combat. Our guns are lacking. The Doomsday Arc and the Canoptic Doomstalker. The Doomsday Arc is better with Core, and the Canoptic Doomstalker both have the same gun, per se, but having to sit still to have random shots for random damage is just a little too much to me. Monolith, in most aspects, is unplayable because of the fact it doesn't have fly. Why it doesn't have fly, I don't know, and I'm not even going to go into that tangent, but it doesn't have fly. And then you have the Tesseract Vault, which is so expensive, only T7. Not quite enough damage, not a reliable enough damage output, where a CTAN just does more for that damage. So we don't have a lot of any real strong anti-tank guns that don't fall out of destroyers. Now, the Gauss Heavy Destroyer specifically. But with the Gauss Heavy Destroyers, you want to make sure they hit. And the Silent King gives 2 My Will Be Dones. And start keeping track of this. He's 400 points. So 2 My Will Be Dones. Okay, that's a Lord with Faireon. So that's 100 some points. And I'm sorry, Overlord with Faireon. So it's 100 some points and 2 CP right there to get what we're getting out of him for 400 points. Then he gives the full rerolls to hit. So if you're shooting into a target that has negative modifiers to hit, your heavy destroyers are still going to have full rerolls as opposed to just reroll ones. And the Silent King also has a wider area that he's able to spread that out, which we'll talk about again in a second. So I agree that the heavy destroyers, I've enjoyed them. They've been a lot of fun. I've run a couple of the single heavy destroyers and a unit of them. So I do enjoy them. They're a lot of fun, especially when they hit and they can do the damage. Chronos, I feel, have kind of dropped off a little bit just because of what units they want to give the 5-ups to. Scarabs run away, and so you don't get them that frequently. And not to mention the fact that Technos have jumped up so good. It's not necessarily that Chronos are not needed and Chronomancers are not needed and not good. It's that Technomancers have gotten so much better. And in a later video, I'm going to talk about all the things with Technomancers and what they can do. I think that moving into Arca Omens, we're going to see the Technomancer is even going to shine even more. As far as a place for Warlord traits, relics, and the ability to put guys back, the Technomancer now moving into Arca Omens and less things and less compulsory units and more synergy. We're going to see the Technomancer just really take a flat out lead. Losing core did suck, but again, so many things got core that he's buffing. And now what I've said, where I'll touch base into his size. Take the Silent King if you have him around you, or next time you go to him. I want you to take him and I want you to just look at his base and then put a ruler down and measure out the range of his auras. You can take into consideration the boosted range for an aura on command protocols, etc. But look at how much room he can cover, from how far away he can cover. That's so many units that he can tag with that reroll, and it's a full reroll. Now, start looking at some of the other units and what can benefit from a full reroll. Annihilation barges. They can generate so many shots off of it. Okay, they're AP 0. AP 0 is weak. AP 0 doesn't do good. 1 CP, solar pulse or solar flare, boom. You're knocking cover off of someone, so they're not getting a 2-up for Marines in cover. So now they're on the 3-up. And honestly, if you put 17, 18 wounds into something, they're going to fail some saves. So units like that can really, really put a heavy hurting down. Spiders get 2 guns apiece. They can put down 36 strength 5 shots. And having full rerolls on a small squad of spiders to support your scarabs, especially going into Arca Omens now, I still think the Silent King has a lot of play. And I think the biggest thing that really pushes me to still say that he may still be an auto include. He is the only way that we get those rerolls. He has your 400 points. Full rerolls to hit in the shooting phase for all core. Full rerolls to wound in combat for all core that are in range of him. No one else in the Necron army gives off the buffs he do. And that's what the problem comes down to. It's not a matter of the fact that he is that good and that overpowered. It's the fact that we don't have access to these stat buffs in the codex to be able to give to an overlord and give regularly. Personally, if I were to give my 2 cents on what I feel is the best way to fix the Silent King and within the Necrons entirely, is not to necessarily give the Silent King the only rerolls and all the buffs that he has, but do more like Mortarion has, where he can get multiple warlord traits. If the Silent King could just pick Warlord traits or force to have those Warlord traits, that means that my Necron Overlord for 100 points can give me a full reroll to shooting. So now 100 and some points instead of the 400 point model. Now I can still get my full rerolls and have a gunline army. But wait, I don't want to play gunline. I want to run Scorpex. I want to run Race. That's fine. Now take your Catacomb Barge, give him the reroll to wound buff, and send him up the middle. Spreading out the power. The Necron Codex has taken all of the buffs that we need to have a functioning army and put them in one 400 point package, and that package is the Silent King. In pre-Arc of Omen, I would have to say, if I had a $100 bet on which one I had to put my vote on, I would say the Silent King is the number one auto include for the Necron army competitively, because of the fact that we don't get these buffs anywhere else. And someone else also commented, and I'm sorry it came in last I've seen this, also the access to stratagems that we have. For one command point, you can deny a psychic power on a 4-up. That means that anyone who does psychic ritual or mental or psychic interrogation, those are psychic actions. You can only try them once. And when they target someone and that character is within 24 inches by the king, and it's a tough bubble to get out of, 1 CP, it's over. That's points that they can never get back for the rest of the game. While you continue to generate points, and most Necron secondaries can get out of the base level 15. You're only going to score 15, but you can go well above it to make up for turns you might miss points. So the size of the model, being able to cover large areas with the buffs, the stratagem, the deny the psychic power stratagem, just so good. The only access to the rerolls for hits and the rerolls to wound, to my Will Be Dones, the damage that he can put out there with just his guns and his shooting, and the big, probably, arguably number one reason to take the Silent King, he gives you 3 command points for no cost other than points. We don't have a lot of command points in this game right now. Cool. That's fine. That's great. It's been not so bad. But 3 more command points for taking a guy who gives you all the buffs in the world that you could ever want with the Necrons. It's huge. It's big. And I would definitely say that right now, at this day, he would be probably the number one unit in the entire Necron army. The closest thing to an auto-include that any army has in this game. Now, with Technomancers being up there. And now that is right now. That is pre-Arc of Omen. But before I talk about the Arc of Omen, and I'm going to make that kind of short because we don't know a lot about it yet, there is one last comment I wanted to bring up that was from David Wozlik. To me, as a non-competitive player, he never was and will be. There are many possibilities to make a nice list without him. Even if I'd use him, it would be just for fun. That is the only thing that I could actually say that would be the argument for him to not be an auto-include. You're a non-competitive player. You're playing a fluff game. You want to run a whole bunch of Scorpex and stuff like that. You know what your buddy's bringing over. He's bringing some Space Marines. He's got a company, some 10-man Marine squads, and just a lot of that stuff. Absolutely. Absolutely. No one should ever tell you how you have to play this game because it is a game. You should play with the models you want to play with. We spend a lot of money and a lot of time on these guys. Play what you want to play. Always. Always, always, always. Even if you're going to a tournament and playing competitively, still play the models you want to play. Figure out ways around them and stuff like that. Yes, there are some models in the game that or units in the game that are just bad, that lack a lot of abilities, and there are some that are really, really good, but still, by all means, always play what you want to play. The Frogtown GT, I went toe-to-toe with Brad Chester and lost by 4 points. And people looked at my Adeptus Mechanicus that I took and were confused at why I had Dragoons and Castellan robots. Those are my favorite units in the army. And they worked for me. And they worked really well. And they worked well into a Dark Eldar meta. So, yes, by all means. However, David, there's one thing I do want to bring up. Err on the side of caution still competitively. Because you don't want to, from someone who plays Magic, I play Magic the Gathering casually, mostly commander formats. Even in that casual format, there is that guy who comes up there and says, well, I'm going to play this deck, and it just whomps the form. I mean, 100 cards, single card format, and still you have people that can turn the game over in 1 or 2 turns. That's not fun for anybody. So make sure that the people you're playing against understand that level that you're playing at. You know, when you go into a local game store and stuff like that, so people don't ruin the fun for you. This should be a fun game. This should be a fun experience, and you shouldn't feel like you are forced to buy a model and play a model because Bob at the shop has 4 Imperial Knights and all this other and not even just saying Imperial Knights, but just you shouldn't feel that way because of it. And don't be afraid to have that hard conversation and say, hey, dude, you know, this is the army I'm bringing, and don't try and like beat it up. Don't bring this competitive stuff. There's ways around that stuff. There's ways around doing it. And there's a lot of things that Games Workshop has put out there within Crusade battles or non-match play, or even as we move forward with it into Arc of Omens. There's no one telling you can't go back and play older rules or older rule sets, or even go all the way back to 3rd or 4th edition. If you have somebody who's cool with it and willing to do it, by all means, they're your models. It's your game. It's your time. Play it the way you want to play it. But understand, the Silent King, he has all the buffs. And in some of these newer books, even without trying to be overpowered, even without trying to bring these overpowered lists and armies to the table and overpowered units, you're still going to have a power creep with like Votann or Tyranids and stuff like that, that you're going to need something to make your units be able to stand and deliver punishment themselves. And it's hard to pull out of the Necron Codex something that does as much as the Silent King. Final notes on this: 3 CP that you gain from getting him. Bigger base equals wider area of effective coverage of his abilities and buffs. He can blow up a tank. He can blow up a squad. He can charge a tank. He can charge a squad. He gives you 2 My Will Be Dones. And he also scores Code of Combat, which I never talked about in this. He can score a secondary by himself. And you don't even need to take him after the most powerful, devastating units in the game. Here, there's 2 Marines that are hanging out behind a wall. Shoot at them with your rocks. Kill them. Cool. There's 3 points. I mean, the list goes on and on. So my vote, my opinion is he is definitely something that right now, competitively, any Necron player should probably have him in your list, and he should probably start with the Silent King. Now, if you're a new player, if you're just getting into Necrons, and if you don't own the Silent King, that's where I would pause. A couple videos I'm going to be working on this week are 3 videos covering my 3 main armies: Grey Knights, Adeptus Mechanicus, AdMech, and Necrons, talking about what we've first glimpses into Arc of Omens and what I think we could be seeing here in the future. And I would say get your CTANs ready. Get your CTANs ready, because I think Arc of Omens is the thing that's going to reduce the Silent King from being an auto-include, because now we're getting some more CP back that we don't need as much. You can get your extra fast attack units without spending 3 CP on a separate detachment. So now it's going to come down to spending 1 CP to take 2 CTAN on a single detachment. And later this week, I'm actually going to be playing a game against my buddy Aaron, where I'm going to be running double Ctans. We're going to be doing a Ark of Omen mini game per se, where we are using the new detachment with the rules as they current stand, just to kind of feel it out a little bit. What are we looking at? What's coming on? What's going to help? What's going to not? All the little pieces and parts. And then after we do that, I want to do a couple videos talking about Technomancers and some of the Ctans and see if we can't get some concepts and ideas going. So let me know in the comments section what you guys think. With the Silent King, please be respectful. If somebody has a comment that's different than yours, that's fine. This is a game. This is a game where we all enjoy this game. We have a real big passion for the hobby. I have a huge passion for this hobby. That's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm sitting down, taking my evening to talk to you guys and make these videos to help bring the community together around this topic. But this is meant to be fun. This isn't meant to ridicule anybody or make anyone feel bad for it. And we're all allowed to have our opinions, as different as they may be. My opinion is, if you got a Silent King and you're going to a tournament, he better be in your list. That's all I can say about that. Moving forward, look forward to a couple of my videos about the Ark of Omens with the Grey Knights, the Necrons, and the Admech. And I will talk to you guys again soon. Thanks for listening. And if you haven't subscribed, please do.